Look at you fucking kid. You look great. You all seen you. You suck as shit. You know the baby fight.
You playing that?
You.
Yeah, I'm playing an intro. Yeah.
Yeah, what's wrong, man? Hey, I said 4 o'clock. Fuck, I leave before the stock market closes. You scream at me for not watching the phone, guys. Hey, Richie Aprile. Jesus Christ, how you doing? I gotta tell you, your brother Jackie was like a fucking god. Great leader. And I heard a lot about you. Yeah, well, I heard a lot about you. That's why I'm here. What do you mean? Out of respect for our friend here, I'm gonna talk nice. I ever hear you raise your hands to my niece again. Next time you won't see my face. You understand? Who told you I put my hand on her? Just keep getting jerky with me. Look, kid, I shouldn't have to explain myself. I'm from the old school. You want to raise your hands, you give her your last name. Then it's none of my fucking business. Until then, keep your hands in your pockets. We understand each other.
And you know, folks, that was just tremendous acting. And our guest today played that character to perfection. He's done a million things in his career. He was in the popular movie Mean Streets. He was also in Nunzio. Who could forget his performance on Picket Fences as Frank the Potato Man? Of course, he was Richie Aprile in the hit show The Sopranos. It is my honor to introduce to you actor David Proval. And David, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor for me.
Hi, Michael. Pleasure to be with you.
So, David, the love for acting really began through your grandmother, correct? I believe she used to take you to the Yiddish theater when you were a kid.
That's right. Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, she was my grandma by name. She was not my biological. She adopted me.
Right.
And she was a great patron of theater and would take me to theater in Brooklyn, New York. The Brownsville section of Brooklyn had a very famous Yiddish theater that all the old Yiddish actors used to go to. And I went to theater when I was 5, 6, 7 years old and saw live theater. And everybody looked orange on the stage. And I love that. They had this heavy theater makeup. It was all very phony, but very theatrical. Yiddish, it's very big acting. Oh, everything is, I'm dying here, and I loved it. And that was my first introduction. I wanted to have an orange face. I remember that clearly.
Now, let me ask you, were there any actors when you were a kid that you really looked up to or idolized that made you want to get into this?
The first actor was the actor that my grandmother took me to see. But he was a comedian, and his name was Menashe Skulnik. Mm-hmm. Second, of course, is Marlon Brando, like everybody else in the world.
Right.
The first actor I ever saw that I wanted to be like or sort of imitate was that man on stage that I saw. And then eventually, of course, the great actors, Brando and all those great actors. Brando mostly was... in my generation of actor, I think the most influential to all actors.
Right, definitely. I mean, he was definitely ahead of his time. And David, I know that movie Mean Streets didn't really happen till you were like 29, 30 years old. So before all that began, I mean, what did you have to do? Did you stay with I know you went to the theater and stuff, but what did you do in your teen years?
I learned how to, I was a hairdresser. I learned how to hairdress to make a living.
Right.
And I got pretty good at it. And I was making a living at it and going to acting classes at the same time. But what I wanted to do was act. But I married very young, and the responsibility of earning a living was primary for me. And as an actor, we all know actors never make any money. Right. And especially today, we're on strike. We're not making the money that some people make. But that was what I did. And I also Well, I did a lot of things. I delivered papers at 3 a.m, newspapers. I worked on a truck loading group for a while with a guy who wound up directing me in a play. A man by the name of Bob McAndrew was the foreman. He
Yeah.
was a and we were loading trucks together, and we wound up doing a play together. And that's how things happen. You know, it's there are.
And that's the thing too, David. People don't understand that what it takes to be an actor. It's not like, you know, you find overnight success or, you know, it happens right away. I mean, I think about you know, Dominic Chianese from The Sopranos. He really didn't get that first big like show till he was like 67, 68 years old. So I mean, sometimes yes, you might get fame early on in your career, but a lot of times you're waiting a long time just to get that one big part, and you have to do all different things. So people don't understand the
No,
sacrifices that actors make.
I know most actors struggle for many years before you see any. But to bring Dominic Canese, I'm amazed that you brought up Dominic because I talked to Dominic a couple of weeks ago, and Dominic is a very special person in my life. I did a play with Dominic. We toured together. This is way before Sopranos. I've seen Dominic on stage. I've seen him in classical plays and Shakespearean plays. Dominic is a consummate actor, musician, singer, amazing singer. Dominic Canese is a great acting talent and performing talent, musical talent.
Oh yeah, he's tremendous as a singer. I mean, you know, I think he's just as good as he is an actor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah. And he's a great actor. I've been on stage with Dominic, on Broadway, by the way, Dominic and I. And very special man in my life. Amazing that you brought his name up today.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, he just his success story is unbelievable, and I mean, it just goes to show it's never too late. It takes a lot of patience, and he had a lot of patience, but he did get a role that defined him forever, and you know, he was willing to put the work in to do it because it took him a long time.
Right. Well, it did, and people know Sopranos again.
Yeah.
Sopranos was a great gift to some great actors like may rest in peace Jimmy Gandolfini.
Yeah.
And a great actor like Dominic Canese. It was a great thing for David Chase.
Right. So David, it's kind of interesting how Mean Streets came about because if I remember correctly, you and John Voight were very good friends, and you, John, and a group of people would meet 3 times a week just to kind of, you know, keep fresh with your acting and stuff like that. And really, they wanted John Voight for the part of Mean Streets, and he was considering going into the priesthood, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit.
So you did your research. You know your stuff. You did your research. Martin, an actress by the name of Marilyn Hassett. She did 2 movies called On the Side of the Mountain. She did a few movies. She played Sylvia Plath in a movie. Marilyn Hassett. We had a group together of actors that we studied with a man by the name. I still study with him, and John Voight was in the class, and Terry Gard, wonderful actors in this class. Jack Walzer, very famous teacher, wonderful teacher, great teacher. And John was studying with him, and I was studying with him. When Jack left us in LA, we were in LA at the time. He went back to New York. We kept together. And that's when Marilyn brought Martin Scorsese into John Voight's life. We were all members of an acting group. And that's right. You're absolutely right. John was headed towards thinking of his life to be in the church, and so was Martin Scorsese. So they had that, and he was really considering doing the role of the Harvey Keitel role, and he suggested that I do the other role of the Robert De Niro role, which at the time this is 50 years ago next month.
Yeah.
51 years.
Yeah. Still a classic, though.
51 years ago, I'm talking about, right? And then John, who had done Midnight Cowboy, he was a wonderful actor. I saw him in View from the Bridge at the Sheridan Square Playhouse in Greenwich Village in 1966. with Robert Duvall. I mean, he was a great actor too. But he said, "My God, this is not my role." And he said something funny I'll never forget. He called me. He says, "You know, I'm not going to do that role, but I can't dye my hair black and break my nose." You know, John's tall, blonde guy. You look Italian. I look Italian. I think I'm not going to look Italian for you, for your career. I'm not going to break my nose and dye my hair for your career, David.
Right.
Which I remember it is a very funny thing to say, but that's how things happen. John dropped out, and of course, Martin Scorsese had already done a movie with Harvey, Who's That Knocking? And he was blessed to get Robert De Niro in that role. Yeah.
And the interesting thing, David, though, when you were auditioning, Martin wouldn't even look at you, correct? I mean, he had his head down the whole time you were auditioning, and you went home and you figured, I'm not getting this. Then you get a call at like 3 o'clock in the morning and they tell you got the part.
Yeah. That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
What happened was that it wasn't an audition. It was a dinner at a place called the Aware Inn. It's funny the things you retain. The place was called Aware Inn on Sunset Boulevard. You know? And I sat there with him and John Taplin. And he was the director, John was the producer, and John was the only guy who talked to me. He just kept his head down and kind of nodded and listened to me. And I said, "This guy doesn't like me." He saw me, he don't like me. I ain't got the, you know, most actors, when you go on an audition, you got to figure right away, you're not going to get this. So just enjoy the blah, blah, whatever you're going to do, the audition. And that's your job. And that's how I felt. I went home, boom, history, forget that one. I get a call at 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning. It's John Taplin. He says, "David, we want you in this movie. Marty loves you." He said, "Oh, what?" I go, "I'm half asleep." These guys were nuts. You know, they were wired. They were excited about their movie. And I understood that. And it was a wonderful phone call. I went back to sleep. I said, "Jesus Christ, I got a job."
And the funny thing is, though, David, I know, like, it was, I don't want to say bittersweet, but you were happy you got it. But you found out that big reason you got it is you'd put on 30 or 40 pounds, correct? And
I didn't put it on. I was a little chunky at the time.
Yeah.
And I read an article, Marty was interviewed, and he says, "What reason for casting?" And I like David Proval. He had weight on. I said, "That's the fucking reason why he cast me." He saw me act in a workshop, not act, but he saw me whatever doing it. I thought, you know, but he just, I don't know if he, you know, maybe he was being glib or something, but I don't see him or I don't bump into him. So I'm at a party, Marty. But one day, if we live long enough, I'm going to ask him about that myself. I was like, "Is that the reason you put me in that movie? Because I was overweight and the other guys were skinny?"
Right.
I don't think so.
Right. And
no, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah, go ahead.
The one thing I remember, I was talking about the script, which was called Season of the Witch. It wasn't called Mean Streets. It was called Season of the Witch. Was the first title of Mean Streets. Then they changed it to Mean Streets. And I saw a phrase, and I said to John Taplin, I said, "You wrote this. Somebody wrote this and stole it from my neighborhood in Brooklyn because this is the way we talk." And Marty looked up, and I remember the one time he looked at me, and I said the line in the script, and we could say anything on this, right?
Yeah.
You know, and the line was "Fuck you where you breathe," which was a thing in the streets we used to say as kids in Brooklyn neighborhood. If you're angry, really angry, but "Fuck you where you breathe," where you breathe. I mean, it was like, yeah. And I said, "That phrase is from my neighborhood, not from Little Italy." And Marty looked up, he said, "Oh, wow. I think that's why I got the job."
I'll tell you what, though. It took, as you know, it took a little while to get that first big movie, but to have a movie like that and you're working with, you know, the all-star cast you're working with, I mean, you know, at the time you were working, so you're thinking about working. You're not thinking about, oh, wow, I'm working with Robert De Niro or, you know.
Well, it wasn't Robert De Niro yet.
Yeah, right. He was just making it big too.
Another actor on a movie.
But now you look back on it, and you see the success he had. You can say, "Well, my first movie I ever did was with Robert De Niro." That's a pretty nice thing to have on your resume.
Well, it's wonderful, and I'm a little bit in touch with him through a mutual friend who, an actor by the name of Barry Primus. I'm sure you know who he is.
Yeah, yeah.
And he introduced Bob De Niro to Martin Scorsese. I mean, and Barry is very close to Bob still now. And every once in a while, say, Bob says hello and how you doing, and but I don't. It's look. Movie stardom.
Yeah.
Athletic stardom. I have in my family. I know you're a sports guy too, aren't you?
Yeah, I sure am.
My son works for Fox Sports. He won an Emmy for producing a sport. My son, Mark Proval. Yeah. He won an Emmy for. He's a sports guy like you. He produces sports spots for Fox Sports. Right. So my wife's father was coach at University of Delaware. My brother played basketball for University of Delaware. A lot of sports in my family. I love athletics. I love athletes. And what stardom, difficult thing to ingest, difficult. I've seen it happen in my life with people I've known before they became powerful movie stars. Yeah. And it's head spinning, it's heart spinning, it's a very difficult thing to absorb. I escaped it, but so Bob and people who had been in my life, stardom sweeps people away, but it's not them. It's usually yourself. You understand what I'm saying now.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Very difficult when somebody suddenly belongs to the ages. He belongs to history. I mean, Jesus Christ, I know the guy's a good guy. He sits and talks, and we have a slice of pizza, and that's it. I mean, so for me, I can't. I haven't stayed in that party world. I'll go out there. I'm pretty private.
Right, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, it just goes to show that, I think sometimes actors get a little stereotyped sometimes because people just think that they're not regular human beings, and they are, and they do their job, but then they want to, be with their family and friends when they're not working. And you see so many people like that. And the fact that Rob De Niro always tells your mutual friend, tell David I said hi and I hope he's doing well. It just goes to show that he hasn't forgotten his friends either.
No. He's very fine human being. Whatever I know of Bob, and that kind of stardom, what came into his life, is rare. Come on, how many guys have reached what he's reached? And just as an artist, as an actor, what he's done. Very few.
Yeah, he really is a very successful person. So, David, after Mean Streets, you landed the role of Nunzio, and that really opened a lot of doors for you. That helped you get a 3-picture deal, and I believe you had a great director for that film, Paul Williams, who's tremendous. So, just talk about that movie a little bit.
Well, that movie came into my life because I was doing a play titled The Basic Training of Pavel Hummel, David Bray play, great play, anti-war play, Vietnam, 1974. John Voight produced it. A man by the name of Bob McAndrew directed it, and we did it in a small theater here in LA. But it was a wonderful production, and a lot of people came to see it, and a writer came to see it who said, I want to write something for you. And I said, yeah, sure. 2 years later, James Andronica, who's no longer with us, he just passed away, wrote this movie, came back to me, and I said, wow, you said you were going to do that. You were at the theater, and you did it. The guy, and he wrote something, and I loved it. And Paul Williams, who is also a member of the same acting group, Paul directed John Voight in a movie too, by the way, John Voight before Midnight Cowboy. And Paul loved it, and he ran with it. And we went up to 14th floor at Universal Studios, the Black Tower. I said, "What the hell are we doing here?" Paul. we were, and we walked into a man by the name of Jennings Lang, very famous man, very famous producer, big time guy. Sid. There we are in the world of Wasserman and Scheinberg and all the gods. These gods. These are movie makers. Towering Inferno. I don't know. We walk in and he's on the phone with Robert Redford's lawyer. I said, "What the hell are we doing here? Let's get out of here. These guys are going to call the cops or something on us." But the guy looked at us and says, "What do you got?" And I got up and I auditioned for him right in his office. Me and James Andronico, we did a scene from the movie. I said, "Here's what we are." And we showed him, and he hung up and he looked at me and he said, he picked up the phone. He asked somebody, "What's it cost us to do a movie in New York nowadays?" Just like that. No, this can't be. This can't. But that's Jennings Lang. He trusted his impulse. He loved what he saw in this movie, and we got it done. And I'm very proud of the film.
Yeah, and that was on. I don't know if it still is, but a few years ago, YouTube had put it on their website, and I mean, it was very fun to watch, and it's always good too because a lot of times as fans, we see somebody in one particular show where we identify them as. So when you get to see them in other shows, it's really cool to see. The other thing I wanted to ask you, I think early on in your career too, you did an episode of Kojak, and that had to be a lot of fun working with Telly Savalas. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the first episode of that famous show, Kojak. And you know who else was on the show?
Who's that?
Actors?
Well, I know Sylvester Stallone was.
Harvey Keitel was on.
Yep, you're right.
Doing the same show, and it was the first episode of Kojak.
So you were on the first ever episode. Which, yeah. And let me ask you, you're auditioning. I mean, not auditioning, but you're guest starring in that show. Could you tell in that first episode that there was something special about Telly and the way he played that character?
Telly Savalas. I'm blowing smoke up of everybody. But Telly Savalas was a great actor too. Why he's just. I've seen him Escape from Alcatraz. I mean, a guy who's done an enormous amount of work, but he was very funny. He wrote me a letter after I did the guest. He sent me a letter, Telly Savalas, which I should have kept. I don't know where it is. It was a wonderful letter. Wonderful working with you. I'm looking forward to following your career. Just a sweet, wonderful man. After that, but the thing is, the last shot of that show, I die. I'm a cop who's been shot by Harvey Keitel.
Yeah,
who plays the bad guy, and I'm the good cop who's trying to help people. I'm lying there and die, and he comes in and he has to pick me up and carry me out. The dead cop. And there again is the weight issue. It was right after Mean Streets, and I was carrying a few pounds on me then. And he's trying to get me up. And he looks up. I know things stick in your mind. And he looks at the director. He says, "Would you have to hire a gorilla for this part?" And I'm supposed to be dead. And so I'm starting to laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. We had to arrange a shot where he was just lifting me into, but finally when he got me up, he could hold me up. He's a pretty big guy, Telly was, and strong guy. So he's carrying me out. And over my ass runs the titles of the show. As he's carrying me out, I'm not forgetting. I'm watching this. Oh, this is my ass.
It's funny too, because I had the first few seasons of that show, and now you're going to make me go back and watch that because I'm going to look for those credits, but
it's the first show.
Yeah. And I mean, that was a tremendous show. And what's even more impressive about you, David, is people may not know this, but you also have been an acting coach. And if I'm not mistaken, weren't you Eddie Murphy's acting coach in 48 Hours?
I was.
Right. And he wasn't the most personable guy in the beginning. I know you weren't crazy about him right away. So talk about
that. I wasn't at all. They called me to coach him I didn't know who he was. I didn't follow Saturday Night Live, and he was a big hit already, and I didn't know what was going on. As I do right now, I didn't know that the guy was a big star. And they wanted me to go to his house, and I said, "Look, I don't go to his house. He comes to me. You know, look, I'm the coach. I'm going to run to him. Who do you know?" So he came into my house. I always tell the story. Cheryl forgets it. My wife was in the kitchen, and the front door was somewhat open. I was in the living room, and this kid jumps into my house, black kid in the living room, holding up the TV guide. And he's screaming, "I'm on the cover of TV Guide."
Yeah.
My wife saw him first, actually, and she screams, "David!" This black guy just jumped into a house. I'm sounding like a racist now. But, you know, I'm born in Brooklyn, New York. I go, "What do you want?" He says, "I'm on the cover of TV Guide." That's how he jumped in. He was cute. It was funny. But at first, it was, the kid's a star already. They sent him to an acting coach. He resented that. But him and I really hooked up.
Yeah.
Really hooked up.
Right.
And these guys, I'll say it, I don't give a shit. When they interviewed me, they said, "We're ready to fire this kid. He can't act. He's a performer, but he makes too many, he moves too much on camera. He's you know, he doesn't have the concentration of an act." I said, "Well, fire him and get Gregory Hines. He can act." You know, that's what I told these guys. Then I met him, and he was really anxious about, he was a star already. Why the hell would you get me an acting coach? So he was anxious about these producers. It was the Gordon brothers who produced that movie, 48 Hours. And so he was like, "Hey, if they don't want me, I got a hit album. I got a hit show. I don't give a shit." And I understand that. I understand that it was protected. But he and I started talking. And then the day they had to shoot this scene in Lincoln Heights Prison, where he sat in a jail cell, was the first day I was on set with him. And it was Nolte coming to tell him, "I'm going to take you out of this prison if you can blah, blah," whatever the movie's about.
Right.
And we had a great conversation that day, him and I. And people remember that scene because he starts singing Roxanne, the song Roxanne, You don't have to put on your red dress. This is in my memory. And I said to him, "What would you be doing in this jail cell right now?" He says, "Well, I have this little music I play." I said, "Put it on your head, and whatever music comes up, sing with it. Can you sing?" He says, "I got a great singing voice." I says, "Good, sing." And he put it on his head, and accidentally that song came up, and he sang that song.
Yeah.
And the fucking scene, I'm sorry to curse.
That's okay. Yeah.
That's what I do lately. I'm cursing a lot because I'm angry a lot about what's going on in this world right now. You know what I'm talking about. I don't want to get into that.
Right.
But it was pretty amazing. And we talked about Nolte. And the guy, Murphy, had his first real taste at what the craft of acting, not performing. He's a great performer already.
Right.
Acting is about. He got it. He understood it intuitively. What I said to him, what we talked about what I think acting is about revealing who you are. It's not about concealing and becoming someone else. First, you got to become who you are. Then you can become someone else.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You can't be a tough Italian guy, Richie Aprile, or whatever those characters are about before you know who you are.
Yeah. And I'm sure too, David, that he's never forgotten that.
No, he didn't.
You know, and it kind of built a friendship with you two, because really 48 Hours really kind of, his career took off right after that. I mean, he just became so big in pictures and films. I mean, it was crazy.
Well, he went on inside an actor's studio. They interviewed him, and he talked about me and him and the process. He didn't talk about what we talked about because I won't talk about it now. But he said that was my acting coach. And he did that. And after that, I was getting these deluge calls to coach people. 'cause he did that. He went on and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, that's
he asked me to coach him again, and I said no because I didn't want to be a coach anymore on a movie set. I wanted to go back to acting.
yeah.
I get the reputation as a coach, not an actor. You know?
Right. And that's understandable. I mean, you know, passion is acting, like you said, from the time you were a little kid, you knew that's what you wanted to do. So you have to do what you love.
Right.
Right. You know, David, this movie, you didn't have a big part in it, but I look at this movie now and I can't get over the cult following that this movie has gotten, because it wasn't really a box office hit, but it has just evolved into such a following. And that was the movie The Monster Squad. You played the pilot in that movie. I mean, are you shocked to see how big that movie's become 30 years later now, 35 years later?
Kid comes up to me numerous times and tell me, "You're my favorite movie." I'm thinking, oh, it's Sopranos, Monster Squad. I mean, I think they're going to come up with Shawshank. You know, you stood there, or some movie of it. It's Monster Squad. I love it. I've never seen it.
Yeah, and I mean, you play a great part in that. And what's interesting too, David, is you got to be the only actor that was in the Monster Squad, the movie, and then there was a TV show, The Monster Squad, that I think you guest starred in, like back in 1976 or 77. So you might be the only actor to do both the Monster Squad show and the movie. They're probably different plots, but the same name, and you did the show and the movie. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. No, look, I'm a journeyman actor. I would go from one job to the next. And, you know, I mean, would I have loved for my career to have evolved into one of those, you know, yeah, everybody wants that. That's a dream. But now in retrospect, I'm very happy with what my journey has been.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. And it makes me laugh. I think about experiences on each one of these little films, or films that brought me into Thailand or Germany or Italy. I've had such blessings to have traveled all over the world because of the movie business. I've been almost in every continent I've acted in. I mean that. I know that. And got to travel, got to meet people, it's been a blessing. It's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I brought this up to you off air, but one of the shows that I loved in the 90s, I religiously watched it every Friday night, was Picket Fences on CBS. And I mean, that character you played, Frank the Potato Man, I mean, that was such a great role that you played. And I mean, you did a lot of work with the children in that show. I mean, it was just those 3 or 4 episodes that you were in. I mean, that show was on 4 or 5 years. Everybody remembers Frank the Potato Man. And that says a lot about you, because you're only in like 3 or 4 episodes.
Yeah, about 3 of them.
Talk about them today.
Yeah, I have a story about that. The character was described as Ichabod Crane.
Yeah.
And who is I'm competing against was the great tall actor who looks like Gregory, who played in Pigs, Jimmy Cromwell.
Yeah.
And he looks like Ichabod Crane. I mean, he's a great actor. And he's the actor I'm competing with to get Frank the Potato Man. And I said, what am I? Again, just give it to this actor. He looks like Ichabod Crane. He's a great actor. I go in and I have to audition for David Kelly. You know who that is, David.
Oh, he's tremendous. He's been in that, The Practice, Picket Fences, Boston Public. Yeah.
Exactly. You know your stuff. And Kelly's there, and I do my audition, and the producer, one of the producers of the show, a man by the name of Michael Pressman, who I knew, I do the audition and I leave, and I figure, once again, I'm never going to get this. He calls me. He says, they're going to call you again. I said, what? Why? He says, I don't know. David has a thing. He's between you and he said, David, it's a real long shot for you to get this, but will you come back? He says, and will you do this? will you break character after the reading and talk through yourself? Because when you left, and this is, I'm bragging now, but David Kelly said to somebody, is that guy really okay? Is he? Because he didn't seem right. I mean, he thought I was doing some good acting, I guess. I know I was doing some. He said, so bring him back. I go back, I do the audition, and David's sitting there, and I break character. I took the producer's advice. He says, and break character and do your shtick. Become a Jewish comic or an Italian mob guy, or whatever you want to do, but go away from that character as soon as you finish the reading. And I finish the reading, I take a breath, and I look up, and I says, so what do you think? You think I'm, you want to talk about this? And Kelly goes, and I got the job. he thought I was a little strange. So I got that job. Yeah. That was a good job. Wow, it was a great role.
That show was very, that was one of the first shows that, they did, you want to talk about shocking viewers. I mean, they did so many things on that show that, it was it was a town called Rome, and it was really a town because so many crazy things happened. And I mean, even the way they implemented the kids played big parts in that show.
Terrific show. Fivish Finkel was very funny. Ray Walston, great actor.
Yep, Tom Skerritt, Kathy Baker. They were just
Tom Skerritt, Kathy Baker. What great actor! All good people, and the two young people.
Adam Willie, and I forget the other kid's name. I know his character was Justin Kirschview or whatever it was, but it was just a tremendous, tremendous show. And I mean, that really helped Friday nights because CBS for years had a winner in Dallas. And then when Dallas got off the air, Picket Fences kind of replaced it. So,
Enormous. Yeah, I've been lucky that way. Getting great roles like that on these wonderful. TV has really been very good in my life. For me. Hey, they're living and,
Right. And it's interesting enough, David, how the Sopranos came about, because I remember you played a wise guy. I think it was Joe Fat Cartello on the Rockford Files. And little did you realize, I think David Chase wrote your character for that.
Exactly right.
Yeah. And I mean, he saw something in you when he did that when he was developing the Sopranos, he wanted to use you in some role. And I think you auditioned for Tony a few times, correct?
Yeah, this is 4 years before Sopranos. I did that Rockford Files with James Garner, and that was a lead too, a movie of the week.
Yeah,
and it was a mob guy who was on lithium, antidepressants, and when he didn't get his antidepressant, he got very feisty, and he was dangerous. But I don't know how I don't remember my audition, but I got this job, and it was a big job because the casting director, wonderful guy, African American. Jesus Christ, I'm terrible with names. Great casting director. Calls me and says, "Look, we're in New York. We're seeing people." I said, "Well, forget it. I'm not going to." I was in LA. We're in Chicago. We're seeing people. Oh my God, they're in Chicago now. They were really, really going through a lot of auditions for this Rockford Files. They went to New York, they went to Chicago, and came back to LA, and I got the job. Okay. Now, I remember Jimmy Caan talking about his inspiration for Sonny Corleone for Godfather was Don Rickles.
Right.
You've heard that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And people say, what is he talking about? What is Don Rickles? But I understood that. I really understood that, the essence of that and what he was talking about. I said, I'm going to steal that for this character on Rockford Files. I want to try and not play a traditional, beep, beep, beep. You're Italian, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So they play cliche. Hey, oh. I couldn't stand it. It's a cliche. I think it's anti-Italian. I said, let me play it different. Garner loved what I was doing. James Garner, I love it. The director said, I know he wants you to be like Italian. I said, well, he is Italian. I said, but look at me. Am I not Italian? Look at me. I said, he says, but you know, I said, no. So we had a big thing, but Garner was on my side.
Right.
He understood what I was doing. And that's another story. You see, he wanted that. Oh, hey. I don't want to do that. It's cliche. It's bullshit. It's
Yeah.
But that's what people want to see. I said, well, look, if the middle America, if the guy in Akron, Ohio wants to see an Italian behave like that, let him do it himself. I'm going to behave like a human being, a person. Got it? Okay. It's as simple as that. You know, that's my story about that. But James Garner, great.
Yeah, really was tremendous actor. So you auditioned for Tony Soprano a few times, and the other thing I always remember hearing about is that Chaz Palminteri, I'm going to say his name wrong, but yeah, he was here's a guy who wrote a great screenplay, A Bronx Tale, but he was originally David Chase's choice for Tony Soprano, but he didn't want the part because he read the script and he saw a mob guy who sees a psychiatrist and he just thought that it wasn't going to be good. So, I mean, it's crazy to think that he turned down a role like that, but things have a way of working themselves out.
There's a place called Mother Gooch's. It was a supermarket for health foods in LA. And for some reason, my wife is a health food person. So I'm there at Mother Gooch's 22 years ago, I think this was. And in comes Chaz Palminteri. Hey, David, how you doing, man? And, you know, we worked on this movie, Innocent Blood. Yeah, he says, they want me to do this thing. They want a wise guy to go to a shriek. And I said, I read it. I thought it was, he didn't like it. They were blessed.
Yeah.
Because without James Gandolfini and David Chase, nothing happens.
Yeah. And I obviously you're disappointed. You kind of said you knew you weren't going to get the part, but it goes to show though that Chase saw something in you and he had an idea to bring you in eventually. And I mean, what a character that he gave to you, because I was thinking about this today as well, David. Your character, Richie Aprile, I think he was the first character on that show that committed one of the worst heinous acts on that show. Is when he runs Beansy over with the car. I mean, right away in episode 2 or episode 3 of season 2, fans are looking at this guy and they're hoping that Tony's gonna get rid of him because they saw what he did to this poor innocent pizza parlor owner.
Was it innocent?
Yeah. And but you really established that character right away as like a force to be reckoned with, because the other thing that I'm watching that whole season and I'm saying to myself, how is Tony letting this guy get away with the way he talks to him, the things he does? So, I mean, that's the beauty of David Chase, because in my eyes, I thought this character was going to be done after the first episode for the things he did. But David Chase always had a vision of how he wanted things. And I mean, that character, again, I mean, that was a rough character, but it was a very memorable character and one that played a pivotal role in that series.
Yeah, thanks to also Frank Renzulli, by the way.
Yeah.
Good writer, Frank Renzulli. One of the
writers. Yeah.
He wrote that up. He was, Robin and a lot of people. But it was Frank Renzulli's line in that keyed me into the scene. That's where there's a writer's strike on now, folks. And let me tell you the importance and preciousness of writers. Without them, you know what I'm saying? So when a writer writes a phrase like when Richie Aprile says to Beansy, how much you making in a place like this? And Beansy replies, well, it's a grind. And when Richie says to him, that's not what I asked you, is a key to that character. Don't bullshit with me. I asked you a question, you didn't answer it. And Richie's like that.
Yeah.
He's a shark, man. And that, when a writer writes a line like that, it goes through your body, an actor, if you're available. And you find the essence, the core, what that guy's really about.
The funny thing is, too, David, though, here, Richie this is what I mean about the beauty of writing. And you're talking about why writers are so important, because Richie, the mobster, was, ruthless and, despicable human being as a mobster. But he was probably a lot better until the end, obviously, but he was probably a lot better as a companion than Tony Soprano was to his wife, because if you look during that whole season, he's very loyal to Janice. He is in love with her, and he's good to her mother. So Richie Aprile wasn't necessarily a bad family man. He was just a bad human being as far as the mob went.
I'm laughing because this is exactly what I used to. You're right. Right. I always say, wait, oh, look at that. That's me and Aida at that.
Yeah.
Union.
It's a great photo. Yeah.
Wow, we look older. I mean, I imagine people who follow the show, if they see that and they go, Jesus Christ, these people got old, man. Wow. Yeah, well, people get older, anyway.
Oh, yeah. It's unavoidable. But, that was what I really felt about what you played for that character, because I couldn't picture myself liking him, but I did like how he was to Janice. Like he was loyal to her. He wasn't like that type of guy. All the other guys, they're cheating on their wives and stuff.
Yeah.
He was done doing his thing. He went home and he cooked, pot roast, and they had dinner, and he was very much a decent. And the other thing is too, I know he struggled with his son. Like, he didn't like that his son was a ballroom dancer or whatever, but he didn't disown his son. He still was a father to him. So I think, like, he was, if I had to think about that character, I think that character was a good family man. He just wasn't a good person, if that makes sense.
This makes sense. He departmentalized. Yeah. No, I used to think when Frank Renzulli and the rest of them were some funny stuff. If you really follow the show, Richie had a sense of humor, a very dry sense of humor. That the only one who got it was
Janice.
Was Jimmy. Jimmy was the
yeah.
I mean, Tony. He was the only one who got Richie's sense of humor. He enjoyed Richie in a certain way. The rest of them go, "Ooh, but Jimmy got it. Tony got Richie in a lot of ways. His sense of humor, his sense of irony.
If you had to guess, though, David, like, obviously you can't be in David Chase's head, but if you had to guess, why was your character Richie? Why was he so angry? Was it because he did all those years in prison, or what was the reason? Because he seemed to have a chip on his shoulder every time. It didn't matter who he was around, whether it was around Junior, whether it was around, Christopher, Sil, and Paulie. He always seemed to just be angry.
It was not getting what he was entitled to, and what he earned as far as he was concerned before the 10 years. It's a long time to spend in prison and keep your mouth shut and do what you're supposed to do. And there's another picture.
Yeah, that's a real nice one as well. Yeah.
What happened to my hair? Okay.
He still got most of it. Don't
no, it's gone. Anyway, oh shit. Anyway, but it was about entitlement and about these fledglings. Michael Imperioli was one. Young boys running around thinking who they are.
Yeah.
And I'm a veteran. Well, he said I'm old school. Don't bullshit with me. It's about entitlement and getting the respect that he thought was coming to him, and it wasn't coming. And it was a whole 10 years that passed, and everybody moved on. So he was enraged by that. Enraged.
Right. And the thing is, though, too, David, that character, though, every episode he was in, every scene he was in, he made an impact in some way. And I always laugh at the jacket scene. I thought that was one of the fun
Yeah.
things ever. But I'll tell you what, everybody, when their character has to leave the show and it's sad, and, you know I always heard the stories, Chase takes you to dinner, then he breaks the news. Right. But the way your character went out was a classic moment and it's great for you as an actor to have that moment, because a lot of people remember, everybody thought, okay, Tony's going to take him out, the crew's going to take him out. Then he ends up, hitting Janice and she snaps. And I thought that was a fit-in way, because them doing it would have just been too natural,
So did I. I thought it was brilliant. And what David said to me once, look, we always felt Richie is more clever, smarter than all of them. Well, that's sad.
He was a good guy. A lot of people thought.
The last time I saw him was at that thing.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I know him since I'm 15 years old from Brooklyn. We know each other many years, me and Tony. Right. But anyway, what was I saying?
You were talking about how David told you he was,
Well, he told me to tell me. And I said, Governor, do I get a reprieve? And he said, I'm sorry, David. And, I love what you did. I said, well, I hope I get a chance to say your sweet words again. I meant what I said. I mean,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
my wife
go ahead.
Clue me in on something. I have an appointment I got to make.
Okay, so, yeah, we'll wrap it up.
But anyway, he called me to tell me, and I just thought it was absolutely brilliant what he did to have her do it.
Yeah, it really was. And I mean,
well, here's what he said. He said they weren't smart enough to get you. Nobody was smart enough to get Richie. He said, so who could get him? I said, absolutely. It was her. It's her. And they foreshadowed it. Michael Imperi wrote a show where I hide a gun underneath the couch or something. Yeah. And I knew that, right? And Michael was on the set today. I said, uh-oh, I'm being set up.
But I always thought about this, though, David. And I know the show revolved around the character Tony, so you couldn't do it. But I always wondered, if Jackie Aprile lived, how would Richie and Jackie get along with Jackie being in charge and Richie getting out? Because that could have been a great storyline, but unfortunately, and it's not really unfortunate, but the show revolved around Tony, so they couldn't do that. But that would have been interesting if they ever did something like that.
Yeah. Michael Imperioli and David Chase are writing right now, is what I heard. They're writing a screenplay. I hope they're a great one, and I hope they have an old mob guy for me to do some scene. I hope they can.
I would love to see that too.
But, whatever they want to write for me.
Right. I know you got to go, but before we go, David, what would you say was the most rewarding thing about your career? It's hard to pick one, but if you had to, what would you pick?
Rewarding? On stage? I've done plays, I've done, I gotta stop. I've done a lot of plays in theater. We talk about film only, but I've done a lot of plays in regional theater and Long Wharf Theater, where you are in New Haven, is sweet memories for me. And I think that in Long Wharf, Requiem for a Heavyweight, because it resurrected my life in acting. I was turning my back on it, and Auburn Brown and New Haven, Connecticut resurrected my life into acting again. And it was wonderful. John Lithgow and wonderful actors on stage with me. I would say Requiem for a Heavyweight is my sweetest memory of acting.
Right. Well, David, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes today. It was a lot of fun. I really admire the work you've done in your career. I've been a fan for a long time. And just thank you for so many great memories you gave me as a fan throughout the years. And I really congratulate you and applaud you for not only the actor you are, but the human being you are as well.
Hey, Michael, I'm so happy we did this. I am. You're a sweet man. I like you so much. Thank you for saying so many sweet things to me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And folks, that's the one and only tremendous actor and tremendous person, David Proval. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying goodbye, everyone.
Bye.